My mind feels like a low-pressure system that never stops spinning. People imagine they'd want this life until they glimpse the barometric chaos inside it. The name Elon Musk has echoed through our feeds for so long that it risks becoming sound without meaning, and yet the questions won't go away. Who is he? Where did he come from? How did he stitch together an empire across rockets, cars, satellites, and code? And why did he decide to buy a global conversation machine and rename it after his favorite letter? At Frostline Economics, we don't take fame at face value. We follow incentives, trace systems, and test the human stories behind them. So we went looking for answers and followed the trail across continents, balance sheets, launch pads, and conference rooms that stretch past midnight. We talked to people who admire him, people who despise him, and people who used to admire him until they worked with him long enough to change their minds. Some would only speak without attribution. By the end, a picture emerged that is at once remarkable and unsettling. A builder addicted to risk, a strategist who tears problems down to raw materials, and a man who seeks storms when the weather calms. He was born in 1971 in South Africa, a bright kid who found refuge in books and computers, and who absorbed the kind of bruises, physical and otherwise, that don't fade as quickly as people say. The house wasn't always gentler than the schoolyard. What he did have was an early, almost obsessive engagement with logic and code. At 12, he sold a simple game to a magazine for a few $100s, and in that tiny transaction, you can see the future blueprint. Build something from first principles, ship it, iterate, repeat. He leaves South Africa for Canada, then heads to Pennsylvania for physics and economics. California calls, Stanford recedes, and the nascent internet becomes the only classroom that matters. The pattern of company creation begins. Zip2 maps and business directories for newspapers when the web still had training wheels. An acquisition, capital in the bank. Then X.com morphs into the online payments engine the world now remembers as PayPal. Another acquisition, far more capital, and a pivotal decision. Use the proceeds not as a finish line, but as propellant. He places enormous bets on problems with violent physics and unforgiving timelines. Reusable rockets, mass-manufactured electric vehicles, energy storage at grid scale. People often remember the triumphs and forget the explosions, literal and figurative. The rockets failed until they didn't. The cars were harder to build than the slide decks implied. Government incentives helped, but the engineering mattered more. He makes an unconventional choice to open Tesla's patents, calculating that a larger electric ecosystem will lift his boats even if it invites competitors to chase him. It was part mission, part market seeding, and part brand positioning that said, if someone builds a better EV and bankrupts us, the planet still wins. The breakthrough that redefined space economics arrives when boosters don't die after launch. They come home, land upright, and fly again. This is not a metaphor. It is a landing burn against gravity and wind shear, an argument settled in telemetry. The company's manifest expands to include ISS cargo, crewed missions, national security payloads, commercial constellations, and eventually private tourism. Meanwhile, thousands of small satellites form a web that pulls internet from the sky to places fiber never touched, a communications layer with military implications and diplomatic headaches. There are side ventures that look unserious until they aren't. Tunneling experiments that double as theater, brain-computer interfaces that pull clinical trials into the present. AI ventures begun and abandoned and reborn under a different letter. At Frostline Economics, we see a pattern in all of this, a constant negotiation between physics, capital, and ego. When you price innovation from the atomic level, the invisible cost is often human bandwidth, and Musk keeps paying that cost in full. People who have actually built with him describe a cadence that repeats across domains. He spends an astonishing share of time in the technical detail, living on whiteboards, inspecting code, interrogating part tolerances, and arguing about manufacturing constraints until the problem yields. He decomposes cost structures to commodities and labor, and then reconstructs the product with a ruthlessness that makes vendors nervous. He questions timelines until 6 months become 3, and 3 become 90 days, And people who swore it could not be done discover that some impossibles are just mispriced. He hires for mission heat, not comfort, and gets extraordinary throughput from people who want to work at the edge of the map. The interpersonal ledger is mixed. You hear about hard nights and impossible asks, and also about the oxygen that comes from touching a project that matters. You also hear a paradox. Empathy for humanity at scale, coupled with a thinner patience for humans in the room. Success creates a different kind of problem. Rockets land. Market caps levitate. The world calls him the richest person alive, then gives it to someone else, then hands it back again. The numbers change, but something constant shows through. Protracted calm is intolerable. He needs a new frontier, and in a world where propulsion is solved and assembly lines are stable, attention itself becomes the raw material to rework. He chooses a platform where information flows, reputations rise and fall, and politics and culture cross-pollinate in real time. He buys Twitter and calls it X. The rationale he cites is simple in form and complicated in practice. The public square needs a steward who will maximize free expression, minimize capture by partisan machinery, and expose the invisible rules that once decided what could be seen. The company is cut to the bone. The name comes down to a single letter. The code base becomes a living patient on the table. The intent to rebuild from first principles is credible because it is the only way he knows how to work. But information systems are not rockets. They don't obey thrust equations. They obey incentives. And incentives, as Frostline Economics has said since its founding, are the invisible architecture of every empire. You can open a valve and still move the bottleneck. In the months that follow, ban lists shrink and some exiles return. The rhetoric is absolutist, but enforcement is not. Links to rival platforms throttle and unthrottle. Some terms are labeled slurs not by democratic process, but by decree. Journalists who criticize or track a flight are suspended and then sometimes reinstated by poll, a governance model that feels like a town meeting held in a thunderstorm. At one point, an underperforming post becomes an urgent engineering brief, and suddenly the platform can privilege one voice by orders of magnitude. This is not a courtroom argument about who is right. It is a simple observation about power. When the algorithm is a black box and the owner is a prolific speaker, the line between platform and podium blurs until it vanishes. The question of government pressure sharpens the dilemma. Before the acquisition, the company pushed back on some takedown requests and complied with others, often documenting the process for researchers and the public. After the acquisition, compliance rates in some periods rise, transparency becomes patchier, and geo-blocking of critics in sensitive election windows appears in places where the cost of refusal is a shutdown order. The counter-argument is practical. Keep the platform up for everyone rather than die on a courthouse hill. The rejoinder points to earlier episodes where fighting in court preserved the principle and the speech. Both views have merit. The uncomfortable truth is that an owner with global industrial interests, factories, launch contracts, spectrum rights, has conflicts a single-purpose media company does not. Free expression collides with permits, import approvals, and regulatory goodwill. Principles that were clean in the abstract become conditional in the spreadsheet. What makes this transition uniquely fraught is that rockets and cars give clean signals. The booster lands or it doesn't. The panel gap closes or it doesn't. Information ecosystems do not give clean signals. They reward provocation, novelty, and identity defense. They punish ambiguity, patience, and revision. A builder whose nervous system is tuned to crisis might accidentally make crisis the product. The feedback loop turns outrage into oxygen. The machine keeps asking for more. Defenders say this is the price of progress. The temperament that landed boosters will never look like a seminar in gentle civics. Critics say the temperament that landed boosters is ill-suited to steward civic trust. Both can be true. It is possible to admire the audacity that reconfigured launch economics and still worry about the social math of a single person owning a megaphone that can subtly prioritize his own speech while insisting that all are more free than before. It is possible to celebrate when gatekeepers are humbled and still ask who now keeps the gates. Underneath the headlines, one through line never wavers, an almost childlike fidelity to the idea that human potential expands when constraints are broken at the level of physics. That faith is not a pose. It has been stress-tested under forces that would break most people. And yet the same mission requires high-trust coordination among large groups of strangers. That coordination rests on an information commons that feels less like bedrock and more like tidal mud. The risk is not that one man's tweets move markets. The risk is that the culture of permanent emergency becomes a managerial doctrine for the steering wheel of public discourse. If the destination is Mars, you still have to launch from Earth, and launches require weather windows, countdown discipline, and ground crews who can hear one another without static. At Frostline Economics, we measure civilizations not only by the speed of their rockets, but by the reliability of their trust systems. Musk has mastered propulsion. The question now is whether he can help preserve the oxygen that social cooperation needs to burn clean. The thing about storms is that they are mesmerizing. They draw our attention away from quieter work that makes life better, boring manufacturing improvements, boring code refactors, boring safety audits, boring reliability increments that compound into miracles. The best of Musk's career is the compounding of boring excellence in service of non-boring goals. When the weather becomes the point, the excellence stalls. It is tempting to psychoanalyze a stranger and project motives we cannot verify. It is wiser to watch behavior and measure outcomes. On the frontier of hardware, the outcomes are historic. On the frontier of information governance, the record is mixed and trending noisier. The same person did both. Perhaps that is the puzzle of our era. Extraordinary capacity to bend matter to our will, coupled with an underdeveloped capacity to maintain trust while we do it. The former can take us to orbit. The latter decides whether we go together. So who is Elon Musk? A builder who proved that cost curves lie when interrogated, a manager who pushes timelines to their elastic limit, a communicator who discovered that attention is a resource he can mine at scale, and a proprietor who now owns a switchboard for human conversation and is still deciding what to do with it. Where is he from? A set of rooms where pain imprinted early and curiosity offered a way out. How did he become one of the richest people alive? By stacking technical bets with asymmetric upside and surviving the stretches where probability said he shouldn't. Why buy Twitter? Because the public square felt like the biggest unsolved problem left. And because the calm after triumph felt unnatural, and because a person who thrives in storms will eventually choose a new one. If there's a lesson here for the rest of us, it is that civilization runs on two fuels at once. One is propulsion, the ability to convert energy and ingenuity into physical progress. The other is trust, the lattice that lets millions coordinate without tearing each other apart. We have learned a great deal from a man who optimized the first. We are now living through his experiment with the second. The results are not yet stable. The forecast is volatile. And as always, Frostline Economics will be here, charting where innovation meets incentive and where power reshapes the human weather. Elon Musk isn't the storm. He's what happens when a world addicted to speed and spectacle finds a human face. At Frostline Economics, we ask a simple question. What if chaos isn't an error in the system, but the system itself? When technology outruns law and emotion replaces logic, order becomes a brief illusion. Musk learned not to fight the chaos, but to turn it into momentum. In the industrial age, inventors built machines. Today, they are the machines. Henry Ford sold cars. Steve Jobs sold meaning. Elon Musk sells both and himself. In the attention economy, personality becomes infrastructure. Tweets move markets, scandals become strategy. Tesla's value now rises and falls with its founder's mood. A single post can add or erase billions. The first trillion-dollar personality cult trades daily, and Musk is both the brand and the exchange. Buying Twitter wasn't just impulse. It was experiment. He acquired the largest emotional feedback loop on Earth. For an engineer, data means control. Musk turned the world's conversation into a behavioral lab, but every feedback loop reshapes its creator. The algorithm began to program him back. The mirror looked both ways. Musk doesn't just build companies, he builds belief. Multiplanetary life, AI alignment, human-machine fusion, not business plans, but prophecies. Frostline calls it technological salvationism, the faith that innovation can redeem humanity. But when technology becomes theology, failure turns to prophecy, and criticism becomes heresy. Capitalism becomes a church, and Musk gets restless profit. Inside his empire, speed is sacred. Deadlines blur, exhaustion becomes pride, and burnout is the hidden cost of progress. He reframes pain as purpose, suffering as fuel. It inspires people, but it drains them. Frostline calls it the invisible tax of ambition, innovation built on human exhaustion. Musk's reach now extends beyond markets. Starlink connects war zones, SpaceX launches military satellites, Tesla depends on political favor and minerals. Frostline calls this private sovereignty, corporations gaining state-like power without public consent. Musk can grant a nation internet access or take it away. Power follows infrastructure, and he builds it faster than anyone. Online, he speaks in the language of the age: sarcasm, confession, provocation. Frostline calls it emotional arbitrage, profiting from volatility and public feeling. Outrage and admiration both drive attention, but when emotion becomes economy, empathy disappears. Democracy needs nuance. Algorithms reward extremes. Space is his last refuge, the only place where gravity tells the truth. Rockets either fly or fail. Each launch feels like confession, a return to the honesty of physics. Yet even space can be escaped. The higher he rises, the smaller Earth and accountability appear. Musk often says humanity is a startup, messy and in beta. It's poetic and perilous. Companies can pivot. Civilizations can't. There's no reboot for an atmosphere. Progress needs humility as much as ambition. The real product isn't rockets or cars, it's belief. Every launch, every post, every promise runs on public trust. Frostline measures trust like currency, and its value is falling. Musk wants to unite humanity, yet profits from its division. Attention rewards conflict. Incentives, not intentions, always win. At Frostline Economics, we study that intersection, where innovation meets incentive, where technology becomes the weather of human behavior. We don't chase storms for drama, we chart them for direction, because understanding is the only counterforce to chaos. Follow Frostline Economics for more insights on power, technology, and human behavior. The forecast, as always, is changing. Stay curious, stay critical, and stay tuned.